PA platform is aspirin made better. We've taken technology that we developed to try to change the balance between the risk and the benefits of aspirin. Aspirin has wonderful properties in terms of being able to reduce the risk of stroke and heart attack, and many people believe cancer. But its number one toxicity is GI toxicity. It'll eventually burn a hole in your gut. So we felt that really would limit the ability of people to take it on a longer-term basis at the doses we think are the important doses, even for heart attack and stroke prevention. So we developed a dosage form that we think dramatically lowers the risk of developing an ulcer, which eventually will lower the risk of developing a massive bleed. And there's still thousands of people every year who die from GI-induced bleeds, and the number one offending agent for a GI bleed in this country is still aspirin.
So what exactly is your technology? The way I understand is that there's a delayed release of the compound when it's ingested?
Well, there's a physical part as well as a theoretical part that we've reduced to practice. The ability to understand GI injury with aspirin helps us create a better dosage form, helps us create a safer aspirin. And aspirin toxicity is due to several factors. Number one, the aspirin itself is an acid. People have heard of it as acetylsalicylic acid. So it's not a surprise that when acid hits normal tissue, it digests the tissue, it essentially burns a hole in it. Now, our stomachs are protected by a protective gel layer that keeps our endogenous acid that we produce to digest our food from burning a hole in our own stomach. Okay, so how does that get disrupted by aspirin? Well, aspirin itself is an acid, and if that protective layer was intact, it wouldn't be any more dangerous than the stomach acid we produce ourselves. Here's where the rub is. Aspirin, by its intent properties of prostaglandin inhibition, will thin that protective layer, and it gets so thin it actually disappears in some places. Wherever that layer disappears, normal tissue is exposed to gastric acid and now also to the acidic properties of aspirin itself. So there's a lack of protective effect and a added injury due to the acid in acetylsalicylic acid by itself. So how do we defeat that process? One is we understood that we wanted to get the stomach into an environment where it was protected all the time. One of the ways to do that is to keep acids from touching the gastric mucosa when it's at risk. So we put enteric coating on the aspirin so that the aspirin passes through your stomach and never dissolves. But it has to dissolve to create the benefit for you. So we determined that there was a pH where when aspirin was finally released, it would not cause injury to tissue. And so that's the pH at which we release the aspirin, or we allow the aspirin to be released. And by also adding in a proton pump inhibitor, we shut off production for a selected period of time of the acid your own body makes. So even though acid could cause injury if in fact this thinning occurs due to aspirin's normal properties, what we've realized and been able to affect is shutting the acid off when you're at risk. Now this gel coat comes back over time, and so the key was to provide a coordinated action of keeping the offending agent out of the stomach when the stomach was at risk. And that's what we've been able to do in a single dosage form. And that sequential release is something that's unique to our delivery system, and we've been very successful with that. In the case of Vimovo, which is our NSAID that's marketed by AstraZeneca, we reduced the ulcerogenic potential of an NSAID by over 80% in long-term clinical trials. So we know our technology works for NSAIDs. We've demonstrated it in our phase 1 and phase 2 studies with aspirin. And we're very optimistic that at the end of our phase 3 program, we'll see a very significant reduction of gastric ulcers with aspirin as well in our PA dosage form.
So when you say PA platform, is this focused exclusively on aspirin, or are there other products where you can apply this technology?
Well, we can apply it to lots of different products, but aspirin is such a wonderful drug. It just has this one flaw. Mm-hmm. And if we can diminish this flaw, we think we can unleash some really wonderful properties of aspirin that have been abandoned because of its toxicity. For instance, before the 1970s, aspirin was the single most commonly prescribed pain-relieving drug on the earth. And it's still very widely used at higher doses. But we've been able to show that if you take aspirin for as much as a month, you have a 40% chance of developing a hole in your stomach, a gastric ulcer. But when we put our technology at that same level of use of aspirin, we didn't see any ulcers. So we have a dramatic improvement in the tolerability of aspirin. Now, if you bring back those doses of aspirin for pain relief for arthritis or chronic back pain or the myriad uses that people take NSAIDs, now you have the first non-steroid based pain reliever anti-inflammatory compound that does not cause heart disease, but it protects you from heart disease and at the same time lowers your risk of developing certain types of cancers. So it truly is a wonder drug with a major flaw right now. Mm-hmm. And if we can get rid of that major flaw, which I'm very confident that we can do, we can reintroduce aspirin as a extremely effective, cost-effective measure that makes people's lives better. And that's really what we're trying to do. So we could apply it to virtually any type of gastric irritant, but we think that the broadest utility that's going to affect most people's lives and actually be life-saving is to make aspirin better.